The spring sun had begun to cast its soft light through the wide windows of Meadowbrook Elementary, dappling the tiled floors of the nurse's office with gold. Kathy Delaney, the school nurse for over a decade, moved through her usual morning checks with practiced calm, bandaging scraped knees, handing out allergy meds, soothing anxious tummies that were more emotional than physical. But something, or rather someone, had begun to pull at her attention like a thread caught in her sleeve. Tyler Graham was quiet, almost too quiet for a 6-year-old. He was small for his age, with eyes that seemed to hold an old sadness. Most students grew louder in the spring, bursting with energy as the weather warmed. But Tyler only shrank further inward. He still wore his heavy winter hat every day, even as the temperature climbed toward summer. At first, it had seemed harmless, if a bit odd. Children grow attached to strange things, blankets, shoelaces, hats. But weeks passed. Then a month. Then 2. Kathy noticed the signs first not in what Tyler said, but in what he didn't. He never complained. Never raised his hand. Never took off that damn hat. She began watching him in the halls, catching how he hunched his shoulders as if expecting to be hit. How he avoided eye contact. How he never joined the line for recess games. The hat wasn't just something he wore. It was a barrier. One day, after gym class, Tyler limped into her office. Just tired, he mumbled, barely above a whisper. Kathy knelt to check his knee, which bore a darkening bruise. She asked him gently about it, but he only shook his head. She noticed the way he winced when she brushed his arm. She noticed how the smell of his hat lingered long after he left, a mix of sweat, old wool, and something darker. Infection. Burnt cloth. Later that evening, Kathy sat in her car longer than usual before heading home. Her fingers hovered over her phone. A part of her feared overstepping. But a stronger part, the part that had seen too many silent kids with haunted eyes, wouldn't let her rest. She called his teacher, Sarah Whitmore. Sarah sighed when Kathy brought it up. "I've been worried too," she admitted. "His homework stopped coming in. He doesn't talk." I called home, but his father wasn't exactly welcoming. That night, Kathy couldn't sleep. She remembered a child from years before who had slipped through the cracks. The memory haunted her still. She wouldn't let that happen again. The next morning, she approached Tyler more directly. "Tyler, sweetheart, can I talk to you for a minute?" He hesitated, eyes darting to the door. But he followed. She tried again to ask about the hat, offering him a new one, brighter, softer. He clutched his own tighter. "I need this one," he said flatly. There was something final in the way he said it. A child doesn't say that unless the object means more than comfort. It meant protection. And then, in one brief moment that changed everything, he stumbled slightly as he climbed onto the cot. The hat shifted just enough. Kathy saw it, the edge of a scar. Thin. Red. Circular. Her breath caught. Not from confusion, but recognition. It looked like a burn. Not from an accident. Not from play. This was deliberate. The world around her narrowed. She steadied herself, smiled, and said nothing more in the moment. But as she watched Tyler lie down and close his eyes like he hadn't slept properly in weeks, Kathy knew something sacred had been placed in her hands. This wasn't just a child in need. This was a silent cry, muffled beneath layers of wool and fear. She would be the one to answer it. The morning light filtered through the blinds of the empty classroom as Kathy sat across from Sarah Whitmore, the third-grade teacher whose weary eyes betrayed the weight of unseen battles. The hum of distant voices in the hallway faded into a quiet tension between the two women. Kathy's hands clasped tightly around her coffee cup, the warmth doing little to steady the unease knotting her stomach. She had hoped for answers, but the truth seemed buried beneath layers of silence and evasion. Sarah's voice was low, careful. "Tyler's always been quiet, but this year, it's like he's disappeared inside himself. I tried talking to him, offered help, asked if something was wrong, but he just shakes his head or walks away. She glanced toward the classroom door as if expecting the boy to appear, but he wasn't there. His work's been slipping, and he's missed more days than usual. When I called home, his father answered. He was curt. Said Tyler was fine, that school was none of his concern. Kathy nodded slowly, her mind racing. The father's rejection was a red flag, a barrier where support should have been. Did you notice any changes? Anything at home he might have mentioned, or changes in behavior? Kathy asked. Sarah hesitated, then confessed, a few months ago, Tyler stopped coming to the school aftercare program. His father said he'd be keeping him home more, but no real explanation. And sometimes, when he's upset, he tugs at the hat tighter, like it's the only thing keeping him together. A chill ran down Kathy's spine. The hat wasn't just a barrier, it was a shield. Do you know if there's anyone else close to him? Relatives? Friends? Sarah shook her head. No one. Tyler's practically invisible outside school. He's new here, moved last year, but his father keeps to himself. No neighbors, no visitors. The pieces were starting to form a grim picture. Kathy's resolve hardened. She couldn't rely on the school's usual channels. This was bigger. After school ended, Kathy reached out to the school counselor, hoping for insight or resources. The counselor was sympathetic but warned Kathy about the limits of her role without parental consent. Kathy understood but knew she had to find another way. Determined, Kathy began visiting the local community center, quietly asking about Tyler and his family. Neighbors were reluctant, offering vague remarks, "They keep to themselves, don't know much, quiet boy." The father's name came up only once, tied to whispered rumors of harshness and anger. Each conversation added weight to the unspoken story Kathy was piecing together. Tyler was trapped in a world of silence, protected only by a threadbare hat and the fragile hope of someone noticing. Back at school, Kathy watched Tyler carefully. She saw the subtle signs, the flinch when the janitor's broom swung too close, the way he avoided corners, the way his small fists clenched when a loud noise startled him. This was a boy living on edge, walking a path shadowed by fear. Late that night, Kathy sat at her kitchen table, files spread before her, notes from teachers, counselor reports, community feedback. She traced Tyler's movements like a detective, searching for a way to help without breaking the fragile trust she had begun to build. Her phone buzzed, a message from Sarah, "If you find out anything, let me know. I'm worried sick." Kathy's heart tightened. This was no longer just a job. It was a calling. She would cross every line necessary to protect this child. Tomorrow, she decided, she would speak to the principal. This story, hidden beneath silence and wool, needed a voice. And she would be that voice. The days that followed carried a weight of quiet urgency, as Kathy's eyes sharpened to every subtle tremor in Tyler's world. She found herself drawn into the shadows where his pain hid, seeking the faintest flickers of light that might reveal what lay beneath his silence. The school hallways, once merely a place of passing moments, had become a battleground where Kathy watched for signs no one else dared to see. Tyler's attendance was erratic. Some days he appeared pale and withdrawn, others marked by bruises faintly hidden beneath his sleeves. Kathy noticed the hesitation in his steps, the way his gaze darted nervously whenever a raised voice echoed nearby. One afternoon, as he hurried past her, a small scrap of paper fluttered from his pocket onto the linoleum floor. Kathy bent down to retrieve it and found a hastily scrawled note, "Please don't tell." The words were simple but carried the weight of a plea too heavy for a child to bear alone. That evening, Kathy reviewed the school's records again. The missed days, the sudden drop in grades, the fleeting absences from recess, each was a stitch in a tapestry of growing alarm. She reached out to the school nurse, who confirmed noticing frequent visits by Tyler, often with vague complaints of stomach aches and headaches. The nurse's voice trembled when she shared, I worry he's trying to escape something, but he won't say what. Kathy's instincts screamed louder with every detail. The fear was no longer abstract, it was real and immediate. One afternoon, in the quiet of the library, Kathy found Tyler curled up in a corner, clutching his hat tightly. The hat, a threadbare shield, seemed to weigh heavier than fabric. It was a fortress against the world's cruelty. "Tyler," she whispered gently, "I'm here. You're safe with me." His eyes flickered with distrust, then a flicker of hope. For a moment, the fragile wall cracked. That night, Kathy's thoughts churned. She drafted emails to Child Protective Services, reached out to local support groups, and sought guidance from colleagues who had navigated similar battles. But the lines between help and intrusion blurred, tangled by legal red tape and the delicate balance of trust. Yet, the warning signs multiplied. A neighbor's hushed comment about raised voices behind closed doors. A classmate's frightened glance when Tyler refused to join group activities. The silence that screamed louder than words. Kathy realized this journey was no longer just about discovery, it was about intervention. She was stepping into a realm where courage met compassion, where a single voice might shatter the silence that bound Tyler's world. With resolve hardening like steel, Kathy prepared to cross the threshold into confrontation. Tomorrow, she would confront the principal again, armed with evidence and unyielding purpose. Tyler's story, etched in bruises and whispered fears, demanded to be heard. And Kathy was ready to be the one to tell it. The days had grown heavier, and the weight of uncertainty pressed down on Kathy's shoulders like an unrelenting storm. Each moment spent observing Tyler, each whispered rumor, and every shadowed glance deepened the gnawing dread inside her. She knew she was nearing a revelation, one that might shatter the fragile hope she clung to. Yet, she pressed on, driven by an unwavering commitment to the boy who had become the silent heartbeat of her quest. It began with a phone call from the school principal, whose voice trembled with reluctant urgency. "Kathy, we need to talk. There's something you should know about Tyler's home life. It's complicated." The words hung heavy, thick with the weight of unspoken truths. Meeting in the principal's office, Kathy was handed a file, thin, but enough to suggest a past riddled with pain, previous reports of neglect, a vanished mother, and a father whose anger was a constant undercurrent in Tyler's life. That night, Kathy's mind raced. She returned to Tyler's neighborhood under the cloak of dusk, heart pounding as she watched the house where he lived. The curtains were drawn tight, the porch light flickering uncertainly. From a cracked window, a harsh voice pierced the silence, followed by the unmistakable sound of a child's sobs. Her breath caught. This was no longer a story told in fragments, it was real, immediate, and terrifying. Summoning every ounce of courage, Kathy reached out to the local child welfare agency. She knew that formal intervention was fraught with bureaucracy and delay, but Tyler's safety could not wait. Meanwhile, she intensified her vigil at school, watching for signs of injury or distress, ready to step in the moment Tyler crossed the threshold of pain into peril. One afternoon, as Tyler hesitated near the playground, Kathy's gaze locked with his. In his eyes, she saw a silent plea, fear, exhaustion, and a desperate hope that someone would break through the walls surrounding him. Without a word, she offered a small smile and a nod, a promise of safety. But the darkest discovery came unexpectedly. A teacher confided in Kathy about an incident, an overheard conversation where Tyler had spoken of hiding bruises and being scared to come home. The pieces clicked into place. Tyler's life was a daily battle against a tempest of violence and neglect, a nightmare masked behind a boy's quiet exterior and a threadbare hat. The revelation ignited a fire within Kathy. This was no longer just about observing or wondering, it was about acting, intervening, and breaking the cycle that threatened to consume Tyler. She gathered the courage to confront the principal again, demanding swift action, sharing every detail she had painstakingly collected. As the wheels of bureaucracy began to turn, Kathy felt the weight of responsibility settle firmly on her shoulders. The path ahead was uncertain and fraught with peril, but she knew she could not falter. Tyler's journey, and her own, had reached a critical crossroads. The shadows had been pierced, the terrible truth uncovered, and now it was time to fight for light in a world that had forgotten how to shine. The moment of truth arrived not with a thunderous revelation, but as a fragile dawn breaking through the darkest night. Kathy had pieced together the puzzle over weeks, each whispered secret, each shadowed glance, each tear-streaked confession from Tyler. Now, everything was about to unravel, and with it, the path forward would be carved from raw, unfiltered reality. It began on a cold morning, heavy with the weight of unsaid words. Kathy accompanied Tyler to a meeting with Child Protective Services and the school principal. The sterile room felt suffocating, the walls closing in as layers of silence were peeled back. Tyler sat still, small and vulnerable, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and cautious hope. Kathy's heart beat fiercely. This was the crossing point, the moment where hidden truths must face the light. Slowly, with trembling voice and hesitant eyes, Tyler began to speak. His words were broken, like shards of glass pressed together to form a fragile mosaic of pain. He spoke of nights spent trembling behind locked doors, of a father's rage exploding like wildfire, and of loneliness so deep it swallowed his voice whole. The bruises were not accidents, they were messages carved into his flesh by hands meant to protect him. The neglect was not neglect, it was abandonment wrapped in silence. As Tyler's story spilled out, the adults in the room listened, some with tears staining their cheeks, others with clenched jaws determined to fight for justice. Kathy felt a swell of fierce protectiveness rise within her, a warrior's resolve ignited by the child's courage. This was no longer just about saving one boy, it was about breaking a cycle of violence, fear, and despair that had been hidden for too long. The truth brought pain, but also clarity. The authorities promised immediate action, a safe place for Tyler, counseling for his wounds both seen and unseen, and a plan to hold those responsible accountable. Yet, even as hope flickered, Kathy knew the journey was far from over. Healing was a long road, paved with setbacks and small victories, and the scars left behind would take time to fade. But in that moment, as Tyler reached out and took Kathy's hand, there was a fragile light, a promise that even in the darkest stories, a new chapter could begin. Kathy had crossed the threshold from observer to protector, from doubt to conviction. The truth had been revealed, raw and unvarnished, and with it came the power to change a life. The hero's journey was no longer about discovery, it was about redemption, courage, and the unyielding fight for a better tomorrow. And Kathy was ready to walk that path, step by step, alongside the boy who had taught her the true meaning of bravery. Kathy's resolve had crystallized into action, no longer a hesitant whisper but a commanding roar that echoed through every corner of her world. The knowledge she had gathered, the truths she had uncovered about Tyler's suffering, fueled an unrelenting determination. This was the moment the hero's journey demanded, when mere awareness transforms into bold intervention, where the call to protect becomes a battle cry against the darkness. Her first step was swift and deliberate. With the backing of the school principal and Child Protective Services, Kathy arranged for Tyler's immediate removal from the hostile environment that had become his prison. The scene was fraught with tension. She watched from the shadows as officers entered the house, their faces masks of professionalism mixed with quiet sorrow. Tyler, clutching a worn backpack, looked back once, a silent farewell to the place that had shaped his pain, before stepping into the unknown. But rescue was only the beginning. Kathy knew that safety was fragile, a thin line easily broken. She became Tyler's steadfast guardian outside the official walls, coordinating with social workers, therapists, and foster families. Every appointment, every phone call, every late-night worry was a thread woven into a new tapestry of hope. She learned the language of trauma, the fragile silences, the unexpected outbursts, the small victories that looked like failures to an untrained eye. Tyler's transformation was neither quick nor smooth. The boy who had once hidden bruises beneath long sleeves now faced the world with cautious curiosity. Some days were bright with laughter, others shadowed by nightmares and tears. Kathy stood firm through every storm, a constant presence, the unshakable anchor in his turbulent sea. She celebrated his first smile in weeks, held him close after a panic attack, and whispered stories of strength when his own voice faltered. The community rallied slowly around them, moved by Kathy's tireless advocacy and Tyler's quiet resilience. Schools offered extra support, neighbors whispered words of encouragement, and even local businesses chipped in to provide resources. Yet, beneath the growing circle of support, Kathy knew the battle was far from over. The wounds ran deep, etched not only in flesh but in spirit, and the path to healing stretched long and uncertain ahead. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky blazed with fading gold, Kathy sat beside Tyler in the quiet of a small foster home. He traced patterns on the worn carpet, a habit that comforted him. "Do you think I'll ever be normal?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Kathy's heart ached with the weight of the question. She reached out, steadying his trembling hand. "You're already stronger than most, Tyler. And I'll be with you every step of the way." Her journey, once solitary and uncertain, had become entwined with a boy's fight for a life free from fear. Through every trial and triumph, Kathy embodied the true essence of heroism, not the glory of battle, but the quiet courage to stand beside someone when they need it most. The call to action had been answered, and though the road ahead remained fraught with challenge, hope now burned brighter than ever before. As the seasons shifted, so too did the tides of Tyler's life, from turbulent storms to gentle waves of healing. The battle scars that once marked his skin began to fade, but more importantly, the invisible wounds, those etched deep within his heart and mind, started to mend, stitched together by patience, trust, and unwavering love. Kathy watched this transformation with a quiet awe, her spirit buoyed by the resilience that blossomed in the boy she had vowed to protect. Their journey had been long and arduous, filled with moments of doubt, fear, and heartbreak. Yet, each challenge overcame was a testament to the unyielding strength of the human spirit. Tyler learned to speak his truth without trembling, to look others in the eye without flinching, and to dream again without the chains of his past weighing him down. The darkness that once consumed him had not vanished, but it no longer defined him. Instead, it became a shadow he acknowledged, a part of his story, but never the entirety. Kathy's role evolved from protector to guide, her hand steadying but not controlling, her voice encouraging but never dictating. She celebrated Tyler's first day at a new school, a place where laughter wasn't a distant memory but a daily gift, and watched as he made tentative friendships, each one a fragile bloom nurtured in the warmth of acceptance. The social worker's plans for a permanent home were unfolding, promising stability and a future unclouded by fear. One afternoon, as golden light spilled through the windows of the community center where Tyler was learning to paint, Kathy sat beside him, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and hope. Tyler held up a canvas, a vivid swirl of colors that spoke of pain, but also of joy, growth, and possibility. "This is me," he said simply, eyes shining. In that moment, Kathy understood, the hero's journey was not about erasing scars, but about embracing the power to create new stories from the fragments of the old. The path had not been easy, nor was it ever meant to be. But it was real. It was theirs. And as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched but did not confine, Kathy knew that hope was no longer a distant dream, it was alive, vibrant, and fiercely present in every breath Tyler took. Together, they had crossed the threshold from despair into light, from fear into courage, and from silence into a song that would carry them forward, no matter what lay ahead.